All right, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to listen and watch. If you're watching, of course, at Newsmax TV, listen to this. I just breathed in oxygen, and now listen to this. I just exhaled CO2, and there are plants beyond where you could see, and those plants are now, as I breathe out the CO2, they're breathing in the CO2, and now watch this. They just breathed out oxygen. Let me get some. You understand how it works? Well, the EPA under Dr. Obama doesn't quite buy all that, I guess. They consider CO2 to be something very, very bad, something that is leading to global warming, even though, of course, the Earth hasn't warmed for 15 years, and something that needs to be regulated by the aforementioned EPA. Joining us now is Leighton Steward, Chairman of Plants Need C02, leading scientist and environmentalist. Hello, Leighton. How are you?
I'm just doing fine, Steve. How are you, sir?
I'm fine myself. Appreciate you coming on. So the Supreme Court, that would be the U.S. Supreme Court, recently agreed to review whether its past decision to allow the EPA to regulate auto and truck emissions of various gases under the Clean Air Act, justified granting the EPA the ability without any legislative authority, which seems to be the way this administration likes to act, to perform the identical regulation of stationary energy-producing facilities.
That's exactly what they have proposed. It hasn't gone into effect yet because I guess people will have a chance to comment on it, but that's exactly right. What they're asking is that it would require these stationary sources to have 30% less CO2 equivalent per hour emitted by these new coal plants, for instance. And the technology to do that is not commercially available at this time. I mean, it may be available in 10 to 15 years, but they know if they do this, they will achieve what President Obama said when he was originally running for president, because he said that he would bankrupt the coal industry,
right.
And then he went ahead and said, and this will necessarily cause utility costs
to skyrocket. Yep, under my administration. Yep.
You've heard that.
Oh, I used to play that soundbite over and over back in 08. Oh, yeah. I remember it very well. So this is what this would do effectively, because they can't stay open for 8 or 10 years waiting for that technology. And once they're gone, they're going to be gone.
Oh, I know it's going to be tough to ever come back. But fortunately, we've found a whole lot of natural gas in the United States, and that can help us out. But we're crazy to shut down these low-cost coal plants. And as we get in and talk about what CO2 really does to the Earth, we can double back and say if the plants on Earth could vote, and probably most of the starving people, they'd probably say, gee, let the coal plants go because they put more CO2 in the atmosphere, which is making our food crops grow, our trees grow, the habitats and ecosystems get more robust. Bring it on.
Well, Leighton,
we all learned in the third grade.
Absolutely.
CO2 is what plants eat.
That's why I had that little third grade juvenile demonstration before I introduced you. Let me ask you. I mean, why on earth do you believe that the Supreme Court granted that the EPA could determine that CO2 is a dangerous pollutant? And maybe more to the point, why did the EPA feel the need to label CO2 as such?
Well, one, there are no scientists on the Supreme Court. So
no brain surgeons either, I don't think.
Well, probably not. But anyway, so they just elected, they said, they would rely on the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or allow EPA, I guess, to do that. They did not tell the EPA they had to call CO2 a pollutant. They said if EPA studied the problem and made a determination that it was a dangerous pollutant, then they could so call it that. The Clean Air Act is what, is above all of this stuff, and even John Dingell, a Democrat, has said, hey, we never intended when we put the Clean Air Act in that it would cover something like carbon dioxide, because carbon dioxide is not a pollutant. There is not one example of CO2 being a pollutant. You can go ask any chemistry professor that, or anybody in the commercial industries that are in the chemistry business, and they'll tell you CO2 is not a pollutant. The only way the government has done it on their own through the EPA is to call it a dangerous pollutant, because that's what the EPA has determined, not internally. They did it through the IPCC, this Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Now, let's look at who makes up the IPCC.
Yes, please, please.
There are about 192 countries in the world, and 172 of them fall into the undeveloped category. As such, if Obama could ever be successful in getting in a cap-and-trade system,
they would be exempt,
else,
right?
They would all get money from us, the other 20 of us that are left, because we've been putting this pollutant into their atmosphere now ever since the Industrial Revolution, and we need to pay those people. Now, this is what I'd like to say to that, Steve. Since we know that there are over 5,000 studies by the agricultural community worldwide that shows the tremendous growth you'd get by putting more CO2 into the atmosphere, what we're going to have to pay these people for is helping their food crops grow for the last 150 years and feeding their people better than they would otherwise have been fed over the last 150 years, and we're going to pay them money for having sent them this best of all airborne fertilizer. It doesn't make any sense.
No, it does not. We're talking to Leighton Steward, chairman of Plants Need CO02, a scientist, environmentalist here on the Steve Malzberg Show. Okay. If the Supreme Court decides that the EPA has free reign, what do you fear they will do with next with that free reign after they, after they finish with the coal industry, for instance?
Well, they'll just go to the rest of the fossil fuel industry, because what the people are doing in the fossil fuel industry, oil, gas, and, of course, coal, is unsequestering, I guess is a way to say it, this CO2 that's been put in the ground over the last millions of years, because carbon dioxide is in these shales that we're now developing so prolifically, and we are going back. I mean, we're going to raise the CO2 level modestly, just to a level that it's been exceeded many, many times in the last hundreds of millions of years. 500 million years ago, the CO2 level was 7,000 parts per million. 430 million years ago, Earth was in an ice age. The CO2 level was 4,400 parts per million. 4,000. You and I are breathing just under 400 now, and you're talking about your plants. Go talk to them. Breathe on them, because every time you breathe out, I mean, you're breathing in 390-something parts per million, and you're breathing out 40,000 parts per million.
Yeah, that's
Now, 40,000 is pretty stout, but even the government will let you know that a lot more CO2 in the air is not toxic, is not a pollutant, because they allow the nuclear submariners that stay underwater 90 days at a time on some of these exercises, they allow the CO2 level to build up to 8,000 million. And the astronauts that might go to Mars and back for over a 3-year period, they would allow that to build up to 5,000 parts per million for 3 years.
Wow, that's amazing.
There is just no way that carbon dioxide's a pollutant. The only way they can get away with it is to say, oh, but it's going to cause dangerous global warming. But all of that is coming from unvalidated computer models.
Let me ask you another question, sir, and that is recently the president, actually last Friday, the president signed an executive order with regard to global warming that all future projects, federal, city, state, have to take into consideration the effects of global warming. Now, I don't know exactly what that means. You may have a better read on it than I do, but all I could tell you from what I do believe it means is more regulation, more expense, prohibitive, putting another, prohibitive layer in the way of business expanding or growing, or even people going into business, and costs are going to go up on every project that falls under.
Absolutely. The poor people on earth are really going to get hurt with increased costs, which is what the president promised us when he was running a few years ago. It is for control. I mean, I can't see into the gentleman's mind, but it must be for control, because if you control energy, you control everything, because practically everything we use is made by something that consumes energy.
Well, look at Hugo Chavez. I mean, Hugo Chavez nationalized, Citgo and all that, and I've often said, Hugo Chavez, when he was alive, would look with amazement to Barack Obama and see how much he was accomplishing and how quickly. And I think now that he's still looking up from down under, if you will, at what Obama's doing, and he's still admiring what Obama's doing.
Yeah, I'm afraid that's probably right, and it is just unbelievable how this guy has gone around the House, for instance, the people elected to represent them up there out of each of their districts. He has just totally ignored them and just put these regulations into executive effect. And I don't know where it's going to end up, but what you just said is absolutely a catastrophe for the future of certainly the poor people in the country and for business, and I think that'll take us all down the tubes, unfortunately. One thing here is I wish the true environmentalist would look at some of this evidence. They ought to go, for instance, I'm the chairman of a nonprofit. I'm the non-paid chairman of a nonprofit called Plants Need CO02.org.
Okay.
Don't just take my word for it. Go there and look at some of these charts, some of the real data, because the models, when you ask the modelers directly, are your models validated, and should they be used for making intermediate and long-term forecast?
No.
They will say no.
Right. And of course,
sir, not.
Right. And of course, sir, the IPCC in their last report had to deal with the fact that the global temperatures haven't gone up in 15 years. And yet they'll base the claims of global warming on another 15-year period where they claim it did go up. So if it's not going up for 15 years, that should be blockbuster news. But they say, it's only 15 years. So you can't win with them. But Leighton Steward, thank you so much for joining us. We'll speak to you again.
You bet. Thank you.
Thank you. Chairman of Plants Need CO02.org. Plants Need CO2.org. Check it out. Just incredible. And it is. It's a control thing, and it's fundamentally changing the way the United States of America operates and what we could do and what we could have, and the government knows best. And the prohibitive nature of these regulations is going to drive us to a whole new world that we don't want to live in and we don't want to see. I'm telling you. All right, we're coming back. One final segment. 877 Newsmax, 877-639-7629. Steve Malzberg Show, Newsmax TV and radio.